Hello everyone and welcome to this video, which is in our Reengineering the Chess Classic series. I'm Grandmaster Matthew Sadler and we are continuing our look at the games of the great Swedish player Gideon Stahlberg, inspired by an absolutely wonderful biography of his that's come out recently. In this game we are going to have a look at a game that he played with white against Eero Berk, who's a Finnish player, honorary grandmaster in the end, at the Kemeri International 1937. Kemeri International 1937, quite a famous tournament, extremely strong, and it was one of the triumphs of the Latvian player Vladimir Petrovs, who was really one of the strongest players in the world at that time. As I said, very strong player, introduced the Catalan into the top flight, beat Alekhine with it, but yeah, perished quite tragically in a labour camp in Russia in 1943. So there's a very good book about him by Elkan Ruby that says a lot about his chess and also about his life as well. But yeah, Stahlberg against Eero Berk. Neither of these players sort of set this tournament alight. Stahlberg came in 9th place, and Berk actually came in and shared 11th to 13th, which was pretty good, ahead of all the Latvian players and just behind the strong foreigners. You had Keres, Alekhine, Floor, Reshevsky, who shared first with Petrovs, Ruben Fine, Mikanash, Tartakova, Steiner. Yeah, it was really a top flight tournament for that time. Stahlberg had a very good record against Berk as white, and well, this game was no exception. So let's have a look how it came about. So d4, d5, c4, d takes c4, Queen's Gambit accepted, knight f3, knight f6, e3, e6, bishop takes c4, c5, castles, a6, and now queen e2. And well, normally black plays the move b5 in this position, followed by bishop b7, knight bd7. I've played this many times in my career. Berk played the move knight c6. In the good old days, you'd say, slight mistake there. The engines don't really seem to see much difference in that, as so often 0.19 for b5 from Torch, 0.20 for knight c6 from Torch. So not much difference really. Knight c3 was played by Stahlberg. Probably rook d1 would be my preferred choice. You really do want this rook on d1. It gives threat of d takes c5, maybe of d5, and you just keep this knight on b1 a little bit more flexible, maybe, because if black does go b5 eventually, then well, you might want to play a move like a4, and after b4 you could get a knight round d2 into c4 straight away. Nice soft outpost there. Pretty typical in the QGA, but knight c3 is pretty decent too. b5 and then bishop b3. Interestingly enough, the engines here like bishop d3. A couple of interesting lines. Just want to show them to you, just because it was basically, this was completely new to me. I never even realized this was possible. You don't normally retreat your bishop to d3 in these positions, and the QGA you normally retreat it to b3. And the engine's just coming up with lines which just make me think, oh really? So always interesting. So takes. This is actually a pawn sacrifice, but the engines are giving this some ridiculously huge evaluation here. So rook d1, queen a7, and then a4, just attacking the queen side. And it's a bit of a mix, really. You're weakening this queen side. You're going to get tempi against the queen, maybe also the rook. And also, well, the black king is not developed, so we're going to get some ideas there. And it's just that just from a human point of view, I'd always assume that white's got some compensation here, but black might be okay, but the engines are just absolutely dismissive of this. The tempo, and then. If g takes f6, the problem is your king's not going to castle, because you'll have bishop h6 ideas, and there's stuff like bishop e4 coming in anyway. And if bishop f6, they just want to go bishop c5, stopping you from castling, takes, and queen g4. And yeah, you've got attacks on here. This one's loose, which is why you threw in a4, b4. The black queen might want to come around here, defend the pawn, but now you could take on b4, and it's just going to be very, very difficult for black. Torch beats Stockfish from this position, so yeah, in general terms, if Stockfish can't hold it, then yeah, it's not looking great. So knight b4 was what the engines want, and now I think my absolutely automatic move would be to play bishop b1 in this position, right? I mean, attacking a light squared bishop, I'll retreat it, and then eventually we'll play a3, get rid of the knight, and then this bishop will be pointing towards the king side later. But the engines, they only look at the move bishop e4. Quite amazing. And after knight e4, then queen e4. And yeah, I mean, the idea is, normally you just say, giving up the light squared bishop that's protecting the squares around the isolated queen's pawn. Really bad idea, amateur's idea. I'd be jumping all over this and telling any students of mine absolutely wrong. But yeah, of course, the engines are seeing some sort of dynamic chances here. Of course, you do gain a tempo. Your queen is ready to swing over to the king side, which will stop the bishop on f8 from getting developed. So, there are definitely chances. Actually, the engines want to play knight d5 and just, ready to transpose into this sort of ending when, you are pretty sure that that white is better there. Sort of weak light squares around the pawn, the bishop rather inhibited by the pawns on b5 and d5. It's okay, black plays actually the pawns to f6 and g5, trying to take control of some dark squares and make this one a little bit passive. But still, if I knew knight d5 was forced, then I'd consider this idea. Of course, what you're afraid of as a human player is that, you'd be thinking of playing rook a7, and then you'd be thinking, oh, is this rook going to get in trouble or whatever? But yeah, bishop b3, bishop b7, d5, rook a8. That's what the engines are looking at, and it sort of carries on, and we end up with something that's 0.23 for white. But yeah, it's a mixture somehow for me. As white, I'd be very, very worried, that I'm having to take on lots of responsibility there, because obviously if I don't act quickly in this sort of position as white, eventually black's going to get hold of this, get a piece on d5, have the two bishops, I'll be worse. On the other hand, am I sure that this sort of attack with white, it's going to work out fine? Very, very difficult. And yeah, those are the the things that the engines give us. Of course, they allow us to consider these lines, but on the other hand, it's if you have to work them out of the board, then you're racked with doubt when that happens. Certainly, when I was playing as a professional, pre-computer age, these are things actually that I would naturally want to play because I'm quite a sharp player naturally. But yeah, in order to get stronger, I had to rein myself in an awful lot and sometimes just play sensibly, not take on too much of this responsibility, but just also give the opponent a chance to do something wrong and give me an advantage rather than strive for it straight away. So this would be something that I could potentially spend a lot of time on, sort of being incredibly tempted and trying to tell myself at the same time, Matthew, be sensible. So different when you're looking at this stuff with an engine, just you can't imagine. So but anyway, Stahlberg played the more natural move, bishop b3. The idea then is if c takes d4, we can always play rook d1. We don't have to play it as a pawn sacrifice. Bishop b7, and now rook d1. Yeah, here Burke actually played a mistake. Not 100% obvious why that is, but it is a mistake nonetheless. The move that the engines want is actually quite amazing in a way. It's bishop e7, so just leaving that rook opposite the queen, but getting ready to castle the king to the king side. We'll show why that's important later. And the point is, if d takes c, then we just go queen c7, and you can't hold on to this pawn because yeah, you can't put anything on the c file. The only interesting thing is, you are wasting a tempo with black here, taking back on c5, and sometimes that's dangerous. Say you spend 2 tempi playing bishop e7 takes c5, and with black you're really trying to recapture on c5 in one go. But well, I mean, having played the rook to d1, it's a bit of a mixed bag really, because after a move like e5, then we've got knight g4 and we're hitting the pawn on f2, which wouldn't be the case with the rook on f1. So it's a little bit tricky to know, was this is this better for is this a good deal for white, or is it a bad deal? I mean, actually, there's some very sharp lines after knight e4. We won't go into those. Stockfish and Torch think they're about equal, but yeah, it does get very, very sharp indeed. Knight takes c5, bishop f4. But in principle, black's actually doing okay. Now, why is it important to play the move bishop e7? Well, Berg played the move queen b6, which is quite normal in the Queen's Gambit accepted, and the idea, of course, is just to be able to take back on c5 with one go and have that extra tempo queen b6. However, white plays the move d5. And here, actually, already the engines are a little bit in panic stations. They're already saying that they want to go knight b4, and allow d takes c6, f takes c6, which is a little bit risky there. You do sort of see this thing in the semi-Slav Moran, only, yeah, what black's knight is normally on a nice safe square d7, where it's sort of covering squares and covering stuff. On b4, the knight's a little bit weird there. But yeah, the engines do manage to make something of it. Torches managed to hold some games against Stockfish there. Berg played the natural move e takes d5, and here actually Stahlberg made a mistake because, and little bit surprising in a way, because I think even by 1937, I'm pretty sure that a game had already been played with this theme. I'm trying to think who it was. Well, I can't remember, but I do think it was already known, this theme at the time, and that's that you don't recapture on d5 in these positions. You play the move e4, and you're just going to try and open up the center. And of course, the idea is if you try and play d4, I go knight d5, and well, you realize why it was black really should have played bishop e7 rather than queen b6, because with bishop e7, with all this sort of stuff, you could just castle on the king's side and you'd be absolutely fine. Whereas now you're getting absolutely caught in the center and all of your stuff is being undermined. And well, Stockfish against Torch, this was pretty horrific, really. Everything's sort of piling in on the king's side, and this was a very nice idea. Rook a3 then, and you're coming round to h3 to attack the king. Yeah, you might sort of think, oh, does black possibly have some sort of defense in a human game? Well, maybe in a human game, but in an engine game, this is horrific. Really, you're getting completely killed. The engines think that after e4 it's plus 2.2, you should go castles, but then you take and go bishop d5, and you've got pretty much everything here really. You've got bishop e3, you've got a4, you've even got moves like knight g5 hitting f7. Again, you do get some stuff like this in the semi-Slav sometimes, but this is a way worse version for black. So I mean, even bishop f7 is going to happen at some stage if you don't protect it. So e4 was absolutely killing in this position, but Stahlberg played the move bishop d5, and now Berg kept on playing. Bishop e7 is really what you want to do here, and after e4, important move here, because e5 looks like a very strong threat. After knight takes d5, you'll have knight d5, but you can play this move rook d8. This is pretty key, and after e5, you go takes, and you've got this intermediate move knight d4, and attacking the queen on e2, threatening to take it with check. And if knight d4, then you've got rook takes d5, knight f5, queen g6, which is kind of all right for black. So obviously one of the big ideas is if knight d6, you've got rook d6, and then you've got queen takes g2, checkmate there. So that was kind of the precise way to get out of this problem. Berg actually played the move b4, so he's really going for it. he's really trying to say to white, well, all your pieces, they're exposed. I'm just going for it. To be honest, it does feel like all black's pieces are a little bit off their best squares. I mean, I'd always do prefer this knight on d7 rather than c6, because then the bishop is open there. It's covering d5, which means you can get away with moves like queen b6 much more easily. With a knight on c6, it just always feels a bit wrong to me. But White's still got to show something. Actually, the engines don't really think there's a big advantage for White here. They want to go knight g5 and then knight d8 to cover everything. Bishop b7, queen b7, knight a4, rook c8. And, well, you're going to go bishop e7, you'll go h6, you'll bring the knight to e6. It's going to be all right for black. That's basically it. Lots of draws between Stockfish and Torch there. But Stahlberg had another idea. It looks like Book managed to sort of trigger him, into attacking the same way that Kemeri managed to in the games we saw before. He played the move bishop takes f7. And after king takes f7, followed with queen c4. And black's got kind of a tricky choice here. On the other hand, maybe not such a tricky choice because, there's basically three moves and one loses immediately, more or less. One loses in a little bit longer and the other one, doesn't lose. So kind of you do sort of feel that a player of Berg's strength really should have been able to work this out. However, I mean, there's also the shock effect, of course, isn't there? About being hit with sacrifices this early. Although, the shock effect can't be so great. If you're playing, if you're leaving a king in the center, playing moves like b4, you should expect to be, to be attacked somehow. I mean, king g6 is one possibility, but then we go knight h4 check. Here, queen f7 check, and well, you can imagine there's going to be mate at sometime fast here. If king takes, I think we're just going g3 check. I think here actually, and something like king h3 will have I don't know, knight e2, queen e6, all sorts of things like that. I should have worked that out beforehand, really. But yeah, I mean, it just is completely winning this one. The engine doesn't give anything better than g6 and then queen takes f6, and then we're just picking up the whole house. If you go back to e8, that's what was played in the game. Amazingly, king e7, that's really the move that you want to play here. What does it do? Well, it stops anything from coming into e6, and the key point is that knight g5 is met by knight e5. This is really key, that the knight's covering f7, and the e6 point is being covered by the queen. So you're just like that. And after queen f4, something like that, I just go knight f7, threatening to swap this one off, and it's all fine. The best that white has got after king e7 is knight d5 check, takes, and then rook d8. And then the engines don't see anything better than a draw by perpetual. It looks a little bit crazy somehow. Looks like black's pieces are really very constricted there, not really helping very well. But on the other hand, white doesn't have that much firepower involved, and also the back rank is weak. After rook d8, we go queen takes d8, and we're threatening queen d1 there. So not that great somehow for white. So perpetual check is all white's got. But Berg played the move king e8, which is you kind of feel, well, isn't this looking very, very risky? Because the key point is after check bishop e7. This knight is pinned to the queen. I mean, this is the key point about it. So you're never going to be able to play a knight d8 or even a knight e5 to cover f7. Your queen's really in the firing line. And of course, the rook is also covering the d file. So the queen can't get back to d8 very easily. So not particularly easy. And Stahlberg makes immediate use of that by playing the move knight e5. Threatening queen f7 check, and of course you can't play knight e5 because of queen b6. So black only move rook f8, and now you might want to stop the video here and have a little tactical test for yourself. Because Stahlberg actually missed a very nice idea here. what he played was very strong too, but the engines point out the very strong move rook d7 here. And what's the point of it? The point is, well, obviously knight d7, queen d7 is checkmate. Yeah, you're just threatening the move rook takes c7 check. You're also threatening the move knight c6 followed by queen takes c7. And yeah, you know, black can't do anything. The queen can't come back even now to protect the king. And yeah, if you can't do that, well, you're not going to be able to do anything, basically. I mean, just basically this whole idea, either rook e7 exploiting the pin, or if the queen moves away, then knight c6 followed by something taking on e7. It's just completely unstoppable. There's just absolutely nothing you can do about it. The best move that the engines see is queen d8, amazingly enough. So, well, you can see how bad that is. Actually, typical engine point. You know, the idea is that if takes, you can take back with a knight and hit the queen, and you might think, oh my god, queen b3, pinning the pawn to the bishop, and then, oh my goodness, the bishop is protected by the knight on d8, so b takes c3. But unfortunately there for black, we've got queen a4 check, which is winning another piece. You've just got to put the knight in the way, and then I take there, and white, of course, is completely winning. I mean, it's always amazing how you know, engines somehow, yeah, it's never the first tactical point that's there. It's maybe the second or the third one. Maybe Stahlberg missed something, you know, within that, you know, because it's slightly more subtle than you'd think. But again, you know, it's quite linear somehow. So I would have expected Stahlberg to find this one. What he played was knight d5, which, you know, is sort of similar, really. The idea is knight d5, there's queen d7. But Burke actually played the move queen d8, very brave. Knight c6, bishop takes c6. And, yeah, I mean, I don't know, maybe Stahlberg noticed here that after knight f6, rook f6, takes. Actually, things are protected. The rook's protecting the bishop. And we're also threatening a rook d1 check with mate. I mean, amazingly, this is also very good for white. But I wouldn't have known it, to be honest. Rook d6, h4, rook d1 check, king h2. The engines are still giving white a big advantage here. But I think it's because the king's so open, so it's not really easy to push anything through here. But yeah, that would have required some good calculation. I mean, Stahlberg just went for the safe line. He took on c6, king f7, e4, and in principle, you know, white's just a pawn up with a very, very good position here indeed. And I was sort of, you know, I was kind of thinking, oh, shall I leave the analysis here now and just, you know, just finish it off? But yeah, I always let the engines play out games, you know, from a lot of resulting positions, even when, you know, I sort of think, well, in principle, you know, the game is kind of finished from an interest point of view. And well, yeah, of course, it was one of those things where the human technique was not the absolute best. Actually, the engines just like the subtle bishop e3 in this position, just waiting to see, you know, what am I going to recapture with? Am I going to take on d5 with the queen, with the rook? Yeah, I mean, they were even looking at the line rook c8, and then you just take on a6 and take a second pawn, and then you'll take on d5 eventually with your rook or with a pawn. You know, that's so the engines are looking to do that, but it's not, you know, it's not that doesn't make that much difference somehow. Rook f5 check is not so bad. Takes, queen d5. Yeah, still going quite decently. Queen e8 and then bishop e3, hitting this one. But after rook d8, yeah, the engines wanted to play the move queen e6 here, or queen f5 check. After queen c4, queen b5, suddenly the game's just 0.79 for white somehow. So I think the point is that the queen now is very active with tempo, and the queen's either getting active or the pawn's moving forward to c4, because you can't play a move like rook c1 because we just take and then give back rank mate. So actually the engines want to play queen c2 now, and then c4, and then they're claiming, well, okay, you know, black's got some counterplay here. Actually, both Torch and Stockfish were managing to draw this as black. I mean, can you imagine? This is we're just sort of 10 moves after basically white had a complete win by force, that the engines point out. And then 10 moves later, just a normal technical position, where white hasn't played too badly, just made one inaccuracy, queen c4. The engines are suddenly holding this with black. It's incredible somehow. I mean, after queen e6, queen e2, the engines are just saying, oh, it's only 0.38. I mean, black's attacking the pawn on b2 and threatening rook d1 check as well. So g3, queen takes b2, rook c1, and queen f6 here. So actually, this was good defensive play by Burke, just offering the exchange of queens and preparing to go into some sort of rook ending afterwards. So, for example, what are the engines looking at here? This was with some extra subtle checks from white, but it's pretty much similar position. Rook d1 and rook a1 here. Obviously, if rook c5, you go b3, exploiting the pin. So rook c2, king g7, king f3, king g6. And the engines, sort of thinking that this is going to be that black's going to be able to make a draw. You just play a5, a4, and always be at some stage able to, either create a pass pawn or, exchange off the b pawn for the a pawn. And actually, this pawn structure on the king side, broken pawn structure, sort of helps black, as you'll see, because it stops white from having a clear pass pawn on the king side. So. Yeah, I mean, that's basically what the engine's looking for, and they think that they can hold it. Well, Stahlberg didn't exchange off the queens. He went queen c4, and Burke went queen b6. I mean, the engines just want to sort of hold the pawn with rook c8, rook c6, and then go queen e6 like this. And then just play a5 to a4 that way. Still quite sharp. I mean, I still think that white's got quite good practical chances here because, you've got a kingside pawn a majority that you can move forward. The black king's also weak, and you do have some nice soft squares, around the black pawn structure. But the engines think that they can hold this, which is quite something somehow. Queen b6 was played, king g2, and now a5. And yeah, Stahlberg decided here that bishop takes c5 was the correct time to do this. Bishop c5, queen c5, and probably Stahlberg decided to go into the ending here because of rook takes a5 here. You're attacking the pawn. So after rook d4, then Stahlberg had to make a decision. He took the human decision here, I think. The engines were looking mainly at king f3, but after rook d3 check, king g4, rook a3, that sort of seems like a reasonably possible way for black to play things somehow, not too difficult. I think playing the move e5 gives black a big choice here in the next few moves. So a5 was played, and then a4 was played rather, and then rook b5. And this is a really interesting moment, which I would have missed if just assumed that Stahlberg finished it off okay. Yeah, I mean, white's got an extra pawn in the rook ending, but I suppose what's really important is that white's got this pass pawn on e5 that can be supported by an f pawn, and the king doesn't have a great place to hide anymore, so your king's going to get attacked. And of course, if the white king can get in, play aggressively here, then the black king could be in a lot of trouble. I mean, really, if you let white just go his own path, as happened in the game in actual fact, then black's just going to be in a lot of difficulty because those pawns look nice, but the most that you can do is create one pass pawn there, probably with your rook in front of it, not a great deal of room for maneuver. So yeah, it's kind of tricky really. What you've got to do, and that's the essence of the rook ending, and this is the one crucial moment, the one opportunity that you've got to try and hold back the white kingside pawns and stop white from playing the white f pawn to f5 when this e pawn becomes a complete monster. And here Burke played the move h6. He was probably in a bit of time trouble as well, so which doesn't really do the biz really. It puts the pawn on a protected square, but after king f3 followed by king e3 and then f4 to f5, it was all pretty much finished basically. What the engines want is this great move g5, stopping f4, but more importantly, after king f3, playing the move g4 check, king e3, and then rook c4. And yeah, basically you're just ensuring that after f4 you take off, and white doesn't get those two big pawns on e5 and f5. And this does amazingly seem to end up as a draw, because the nice thing about it is that you can now sort of, what's the best line to look at here? Rook a3, is this a nice long line? No, sorry, I'll have a look at rook c2 here. Rook takes b4, rook a2. The key point is by, sort of pinning down the pawn to f2, you're creating a target. You can give up this a pawn, it's never going to become a queen, but you can take the f2 pawn there as well somehow. And then the h2 pawn as well if you want. So what do the engines give here? They give king f5, rook takes f2 check, king takes g4, and then something like, for example, one great idea was h5 check, king h5, rook h2, king g6, a3, g4, a2. And yeah, never 100% easy, but this does end up as a draw. Another idea there was to play the move a3, rook a4, a2, h3, king f7, and the king's coming into e6 there. And again, the engines think that this should end up as a draw. I mean, I think in a quick play finish, you'd have plenty of opportunity to get it wrong with black, but in principle, this should be sufficient. And well, I mean, the key thing to that you'd have to remember for a practical game is this idea g5 to g4, which at least gives you a chance of fighting back. But yeah, I mean, the key point, of course, stop white from really mobilizing his kingside pawns. I mean, it's possible that that Burke was thinking, oh well, white will play something like f4 and then I'll have a check, so I just need a bit of a waiting move. Maybe he just missed that white plays king f3 first, and then he's just going to play king e3 and f4 and then move on, and you don't actually get these checks. You don't actually win stuff on the second rank with check. Here Burke really, well, I mean, I think he must have been in time trouble here, because his game, his moves sort of look like that somehow. I mean, he's just giving white extra tempi here and not really getting anywhere. King f7, f5 here. King e3 feels a little bit more natural, to be honest, to bring the king up first, but f5 was played, and that's also good. King e7, king e3, rook g4, rook b7, and you can see what the black problem is here. Yeah, the rook's gone passive. These pawns are really strong. They can just be supported by the white king, so you never really get at them. And yeah, the white king is ready to move in, just in case you move the rook off the fourth rank there. So e6 was played by Stahlberg. H5, king f3, rook d4, h3, and Stahlberg just looking to convert those pawns on f5 and e6 into pawns on f6 and e6. So rook d3 check, king f4, b3, rook d4. It all looks a bit sad from Burke, but I can tell you I've been in that situation as well, where you felt I had a chance in that rook ending, but I never found anything to do, and I just ended up giving useless checks and just helping my opponent. And well, after king d6 here, by now Burke had completely thrown away everything, and he resigned. But a pretty interesting game there, I thought. Yeah, I mean, first of all, the opening was quite interesting. This Queen's Gambit accepted, and well, important theme there, e4. And well, you can see that a move like knight c6 rather than knight d7 in the opening, it might not be in principle a bad move, but it's definitely a risky move. Blocking your pieces when they're controlling the center, that can have a downside, and it's not always a visible downside. Sometimes the line never pops up, but take a few more risks and suddenly it does. The bishop not covering d5, the king stuck in the center after this move, queen b6 on top of it, and then bang, e4 hits you. But yeah, I mean, it was a very interesting, plenty of interesting lines there, and of course this computer win was very, very nice. But also the whole conversion technique. I mean, I'm always struck at how easily, games turn from winning to just a clear advantage, and then, moving on to only a small advantage. But what you also notice about that is that often when that happens, the small advantage that an engine sees is kind of still a sort of slightly unpleasant advantage for the opponent. So the engines are seeing that this rook ending, for example, is drawn, but you've only got really one chance here, one chance to make this possible. Otherwise, you're just not going to make it. And well, the move g5 is not 100% obvious. I think a strong player with a bit of time should be capable of finding it, because it's natural from a positional point of view, stopping f4, clamping down on the white king side with g4. But still, I wouldn't say that it's. I wouldn't say that if I was having to move at blitzbleed that I'd really notice this moment in the game and say, right, now's the moment where I need to do something. It's. I mean, I'd be sensing around this point that I've got some chances. I need something accurate, but whether I'd know it was that moment exactly, I certainly couldn't guarantee. But anyway, very interesting game, and yeah, in the end, pretty nice game from Stahlberg. Some mistakes, of course, but also some pretty good play as well. So there we are. Hope you enjoyed that one. I've got lots more to come from Stahlberg. Well, if you're enjoying the videos, hope you subscribe to the channel, give the video a like, take a look at my my new books, especially Reengineering the Chess Classics, which is sort of inspired this video series. And otherwise, thanks very much for watching, and hope to see you at the next video. Thanks for watching.